Khadija Haliru is an entrepreneur, an author, speaker, and the current counselor for the town of Ingersoll, recognized for her commitment to inclusive leadership, community building, and public service. Following her historic election to the municipal council, Khadija has been a strong advocate for affordable housing, infrastructure, diversity, and equitable opportunities. She championed the establishment of the town's Diversity and Inclusion Committee, served on the Police Services Board, and earned a reputation as a leader who brings people together to create meaningful change. And Khadija recently announced that she will not be seeking another term on council. Boo, well, who said that? And this decision reflects not a step back from public service, but a step toward an even broader mission. Yay. Her next chapter will focus on expanding her impact through global speaking, leadership development, and the Black Opportunity Network, an initiative dedicated to mentoring future leaders, advancing entrepreneurship, creating pathways for economic opportunity, and equipping the next generation with the skills, confidence, and connections to succeed. As the founder of Hanak Foods, K-Body Blends, KBGAR, and KBG Care, Khadija believes leadership extends far beyond elected office. She remains committed to serving communities, building bridges across cultures, and empowering people locally, nationally, and globally. And with that, it is an honor to have Khadija help with us. So this is for that camera over there.
All right.
And this is for you.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, we're fancy here.
We have a clicker. And thank you, everyone.
Amazing. What an honor to be here today. And the slide is the next thing. I'll just go up. Cameron?
Yes, it should be good to go.
Where is that? I think I'm gonna need help.
Oh, you're gonna need help?
Yes.
Cameron will be able to help you.
All right, thank you so much for coming. It's an amazing day, isn't it? Beautiful summer day. So my name is Khadija Haliru, coming from Ingersoll. I am a simple, mom of three. Immigrant 20 years ago. I actually celebrated my 20th year in Canada in 2006. We arrived.
Something special. Yeah, so run for office, you did a wonderful job introducing what you do and why you do it. And I want to say it is an amazing opportunity that you have here in Waterloo to have things that can inspire you and jig you up, because you do need that. For me, From Zaria to the World is a book that I just wrote. It's about my story, how roots, faith, and refusing to shrink has automatically built a legacy that I didn't even plan, right? And I just want to share with you that my maiden name is Khadija Farouk Mahmoud. I've been recently divorced and just decided this year that I was going to go back to my maiden name. And so that's kind of like my introduction. So what is, run for office? The Project 3000 Waterloo is looking to register 3,000 new voters before October 2026. And future councillors, trustees, MPs, and Waterloo people in this room have come and gone, and some people are here looking to run for office like, hey, Ada. So we're going to talk about voting and what it means. I'll tell you that when it comes to voting and when it comes to being voted for, it doesn't start the year you decide. So my story begins again from Zaria. I was born in a city and my parents moved 2 hours south. And I was raised in a community of very, very diverse people. When my mom took me to school at the age of 3, she handed me over to an Indian teacher. Her assistant was a Dutch lady. And my second year, nursery 2, I had a Dutch teacher. Her assistant was a Nigerian lady. And we have what we used to call the reception class, which is you getting ready for grade 1. And there was a Dutch teacher too. And then my first grade teacher was a British teacher. Second grade teacher was a British teacher. Third grade was Canadian. Fourth grade was British. Fifth grade was American. And the sixth grade, yay, I finally got my first Black teacher who was Ghanaian. So tell me, Way back in the 70s in Nigeria, it was one of the most diverse places to be. And in fact, any British colony around the world was as diverse as it was in Nigeria. And we were one of those countries that didn't fight a war to kick the British out. We just said, hey, come to the table. We need to say, I think it's time to go now. So there was that respect on the table. And I want to say that very, very specifically because it's the kind of confidence that comes with every Nigerian you see today that a lot of people don't understand. We were just like, hey, you can't just keep doing this. We need to sit down and we need to, you need to prepare us to take over from you so you can go. And that's what happened. So we come from a very, very diverse background. So when I come to North America after we got married and we wanted to kind of just explore as a young family, we left for the US first and we were shocked at the racism. For the first time we looked at ourselves, we realized we're different. I didn't feel that different in my country, even though it was a welcoming country to everybody else. But I felt that way in the US. And it made us understand that there was a myopic view of how people see Black people down there. And so after 3 years, we decided we needed to leave. And this is year 2003, I'm talking, right after 9/11, okay, guys? It was the Bush era where when I say salam alaikum to my mom on the phone, we hear a click because the FBI is listening now. And when we got our mail, it was already slashed open. So those were the years where we had very direct, impact for what people thought we were or who we were. And so when we made a decision to come to Canada, it was like a breath of fresh air, a place to start afresh. We heard it was more diverse. We heard it was more welcoming. And so we left and we arrived in Vancouver. For me, as a young mom, I just had a 4-month, 5-month-old in my hands when we came. I went straight to the city. I said, hey, I'm a newcomer. How can I help? Because I knew I wasn't going to go straight to work, right? And so in that moment, I felt I was in my new country with a fresh start and I needed to contribute. That was the mindset of most immigrants, right? And so I came in and I went straight to the city and I asked that question and they said, well, you can volunteer for the crisis line. We need help. I said, awesome. And I spent 1 full year doing a 12-hour shift once a month, holding the other end of the phone for someone in need, for someone in crisis. And that gave me my first Canadian experience, knowing what this landscape was. It was a really drug-infected time. Vancouver police was battling with mental health, social workers. So just imagine for me as a newcomer, knowing exactly what the problems of my new country was and being able to contribute that way. And then when I thought I needed to make money, I went over to the city and I said, hey, I would like to start a daycare. How do I do it? They said, wow, there is a Thursday class for people wanting to start daycares. So when you come in and learn, then perhaps you could start one. I went. That night was an approval for if you want to have your house inspected. Now you know how to make meals. Now you know how to care for kids, maximum 5 kids, and then we'll come inspect your house and we'll see. So, and I tell you this for a reason, so you'll see at the end. So basically I did exactly that. They came over to my house and said, oh, okay, front door, back door, exit, okay, you pass. And I started my daycare exactly 1 month after I arrived in the country. Now, I want to say at the time, most immigrants knew that the first point of call was volunteer. You're not just coming to demand a job. You want to learn the landscape, right? You want to understand the systems. Because the Canadian way is somebody has to trust you. Somebody has to know you. And that was my way to get myself confidently settled in this country. Now, eventually, my husband looked for work for 6 months and couldn't find work. He was a shipping expert before we left the country, had a good job, and now he was frustrated. And so one day he comes back, and I worked in telecom before we left Nigeria, so he comes back and he throws this newspaper, he's like, you go try. And I look at the back and it was, Rogers is hiring. So I applied. Within a week, I got a call, interview. The next week, can you resume? My husband said, this country's for women. I'm like, it was so like, how could you just get a job just like that? And I'm like, so I started my job at Rogers. And 3 months later, I found all the jobs that my husband was looking for were not advertised outside. They were internally advertised, and they were in Brampton, Ontario. So I worked my butt off. He worked looking for work. And at the end of the year, my manager says, Khadija, I would just want to say you're an asset to Rogers. You've done amazing. You carried the team even when you weren't here. So if you need anything, just let me know. I said, I do. Can I get a transfer to Brampton? She's like, really? I said, yeah. I don't have family here, and I feel like I made a mistake of coming to Vancouver when I had 2 cousins who could have been supportive in Brampton, and it's kind of lonely, and my husband can't find work. She's like, no problem. I got a transfer the next day. I wasn't even expecting it. She's like, Khadija, the director approved. I'm like, no. She's like, yeah, isn't that what you want? I'm like, oh, okay. Yes, that's what I want. And I go home and I tell my husband, he's so excited. He's like, really? I'm like, yes, Brampton. And that's how we got our chance to come to Brampton. And what do you think I did? I got to Brampton and went to City Hall. I'm like, hey, I'm a newcomer. I'd like to start a business. And I tell you this story because some of the mistakes immigrants making, and generally even when you're born and raised here, is you just assume how things work. You don't go straight to the source to find out how it does. And that was my way to navigate the system, is just going to the source and learning how things worked. And so over the years, I raised my kids in Brampton. We ended up spending 10 years in Brampton. I had a business. I launched Nigerian Stew in a Jar. How many people have ever heard of that? Yeah, 2016. It was a big deal, then COVID messed it up. So basically, I'm telling you the story because running for office and being confident as a leader, or knowing and understanding how systems work, takes work. And it does require you to be curious enough to know how the system works. A lot of mistakes people make, and I've interviewed a few people who say they ran for office and they couldn't really understand why they didn't win, it was rigged or this. And the question I ask, like I just asked you, what do people know you for? How do people know you? It's not just about the year the election is open, it's about what you've done in the past. So I launched the stew in 2016. My husband comes back from Africa from a business that went sour, and he's like, we need to move. I don't want this mortgage anymore. We need to buy outright, figure it out, go to a small place. Very frustrated. We moved to Ingersoll. So we discovered Ingersoll as a small, quaint town that was familiar to me as somewhere like Zaria. And I hope we're still on the slide, right? Okay. So somewhere like Zaria that I felt very comfortable with. It was on a highway, and I thought, I could still manage to kind of survive a business, right? But what happened is I found myself looking really different. It was such a lonely place. I couldn't find anyone that looked like me. I was like, wow, how would I do a business in a town where I don't see people like me? And then all of a sudden it hit me like, if I don't show up, then nobody will know about people like me. So I decided to call up a realtor and I said, hey, I want to shop downtown. He's like, downtown? I'm like, yeah, I need a small shop. I make skincare, and I want to make sure people know me and my shop. And he says, you know what, I'll find something for you. And this man went along and found me a very small, you know how you have a very nice, small, quaint shop in the middle of downtown? And I actually have a double door beside me where people would walk through and go to the parking lot and come from the parking lot. And whether you liked me or not, knew me or not, I was making skincare that had lavender scenting all over and roses and, you know, scents. Just people are coming and like, what is going on here? This is amazing. I said, I make skincare. I use African shea butter. Come on in, sample this, sample that. And that was the beginning of people getting to know who I was. I cannot tell you how many times a customer spent an hour with me just because they were curious enough to say, so where are you from? So how do you talk like that? Did you grow up in this country? How long have you been here? Why do you wear that on your head? Oh my God. And it was just the reason that I had to say to myself, maybe this is my mission. I'm gonna say, come on, sit down. Yeah, I was born and raised in Nigeria. I only came to the US after 2 kids, and the, shock. And oh my God, tell me more. And that's how I got to educate a whole town about who I was as a Nigerian, who I was as an African, who I was as a Muslim, who I was as an immigrant, and how diversity can bring beauty if people only understood and stopped fearing each other more. And so I was minding my business. Okay, this is why I say campaign starts early. You listen before you speak, because I heard a lot of people. And relationships, not networks. Remember the hour sit down, not just the 5 minute, hey, I know you, you know me. And then the integrity is the campaign. Because when people get to know you deeply and understand who you are, there are no secrets about you anymore. They tend to feel comfortable with you. And so I was minding my business in my house when some lady came. She became a friend and she's like, hey, Khadija, I think I want to talk to you about something. I'm like, come on in. A few ladies in town think really seriously that you should run for office. I laughed. She's like, seriously, Khadija. And you know why? I remember my little shop I had downtown. I was minding my business, enjoying myself. That shop was owned by the city. It was the regular downtown shop. It was owned by the city. The upstairs was vacant for the 2 years I was there. And they decided to put it on a chopping block and sell it. And council in most cities operate because you guys don't ask questions. Nobody asks questions. Nobody knows what's happening. And so I ask, why am I not the first to know about this? Because I'm your tenant. And they're like, oh, we can't afford to spend money on this building anymore. So the council is just it's on the agenda. We're gonna try to. And I went on Facebook and I ranted to the whole town. I said, hey guys, I'm a newcomer to this town, just trying to do my best. And I've been renting from the city. And I don't understand why I wasn't allowed to have a say in selling the shop. And in fact, I had so many ideas. I wondered why it was vacant. They could have used it for an incubator hub. It could have been used for different things. Why would you sell something that is doing so well? It had that walkway. There was a phone booth. There was a washroom. I opened doors for seniors all the time to have a little break after all the restaurants downtown. Why would you do this? If you're not aware that this is happening, better be aware there's gonna be a vote, and I don't think this is the right thing to do. In my comment section, they're selling the car's walkway? Really? When? Who? Who gave permission? Oh, Carr will be turning in his grave right now. Oh my God, what's going on? And it became the town square, okay? People were like pissed, upset. They ended up selling it. And I got a buyer who says, hey, I can't, for insurance purposes, keep the washroom open. I have to shut down and it's no more public. And guess what? People came, opened the door. Khadija, why would you do that? Why would you do that? I'm like, not me. It wasn't me. So before I got negative vibes on the name that I had built, I decided to move from that shop. But what I didn't realize is that people felt they were happy to know about me and how I spoke up. People felt without me speaking up, nobody would know. There was a lot of, we need to vote council out. This mayor needs to go, and this and this and that, on that comment thread. So that was why people felt, you know what? Let's go talk to this lady and ask her to run for office. So you see, the story is, you don't run just because you want to run. You don't start campaigning just because you decide to run. What your life is doing already is your campaign, okay? And so nobody will tell you that winning the seat does not guarantee being allowed to fully occupy it after you win. As a first-time Black councillor, I spoke to Black women who report being reported to the Integrity Commissioner at higher rates than anyone. So what my reality was after winning was getting to the table. I'm very excited to be at the table, realizing that as an immigrant, my exposure, my experience, my stuff that we've gone through from where we come from made me stand out as someone who knew what I was saying more than anyone in that room. And the only reason why people will learn more is if they're open and open-minded enough to listen to someone who's different, to someone who brings a different perspective. And I want to say I credit all my counselors for just being as open-minded as I was, but we just have one problem. The head of council wasn't having it. I wasn't just going to come and start dictating. I wasn't just going to come and start bringing ideas that nobody understood. And it became, the room started to shrink around me. But you know what's happening in the world today is it's moving so fast. Just last year, DEI was a good thing to know. Today, it's something to fear. So what do? You get to the room, you start making decisions, you refuse to shrink, and then the system starts to work against you. When you hear people of minority backgrounds talk about racism or discrimination, if you don't understand it, you don't see it, right? You got to understand it and know what it feels like. And then when it's happening, you see it. But the average person who doesn't experience it doesn't see it, which is a privilege, right? That we say the white privilege. But you find that a lot of white people understand what it feels like now because they listen and they've heard us, so that you can empathize. When that's missing, the room begins to shrink around you. And I try to make sure that I reveal the good, the bad, and the ugly in my story, because it only is going to prepare you if you're looking to run for office. So document everything, because your service record is your greatest protection. So what do you think I did? I campaigned on things that I heard over the years. I campaigned on things that people told me when I was knocking on doors. I campaigned on things that I felt personally, as solutions that would benefit the community. And when I ran for office and promised them, I didn't know just to promise and then just, go sit down. I created a motion for every single one of them. My goal was I was going to put these motions through as soon as we got in. And I was laughed at. Hey, Khadija, take it easy. You don't have to do this all at once. I'm like, really? Yeah, it's okay. Just do one or two. Over time, you'll do all of them. I said, okay. And I submitted 10 motions in one night. Because you challenged me, I put them through one night. And that night, if you can find that video online, I was talking the whole council meeting and I was tired. Because every minute we debated a motion, passed, didn't pass. All right, Council Haliru, and I was like, oh, okay. And then I went again. And then I went again. And then I went again. But out of 10 motions, I got 7 passed. And guess what? Thank you. And guess what? Because of those 7, I had other motions to follow to make sure to, and I look back now, and nobody else has actually come up with motions that they created out of thin air. It has been motions that fell in our laps, motions that we had to create during council meetings because we needed something. And I look back and I'm like, you guys don't have any ideas? Like, seriously? But then that's the point. The point is, until you allow someone new, until you allow someone with a different perspective to come to the table, there's nothing new or different that is going to happen. And that is precisely why we need to run for office. Why you that looks the most different needs to step up and go to that table and bring those ideas. Because without you at the table, it's the same old, same old. Kitchener has grown and bloomed in the last 15 years. I used to come to Kitchener every Friday for some meetings from Brampton. When the highway was making me get home at 2 a.m. when they were building the 401, and I tell you, Kitchener has grown from then. People were leaving Brampton and Mississauga to come to Milton. I had a lot of friends that moved this way. It was such a male-dominated, white-dominated council. Things were not happening. If not because of the highway that was happening and people started to say, hey, let's take a look at Kitchener. People weren't coming here because it was so closed up. But the moment Kitchener became the center of boom, the farmers market, I used to come for vendor shows at the City Hall. We used to come just visit people doing things. And all of a sudden, the diversity that you saw on council, the women getting on council, started to make things happen. Because the moment you have someone different at the table, even though there's challenges to bring them up and have them supported, it adds some extra spice to what's already there. And so building your support network before you need it is crucial, because God will reveal those champions in time. And so just in this whole story that I've told, I wasn't fine throughout these last 3-4 years. I was standing, just making sure everything that I promised to do got done. I was investigated by the Integrity Commissioner because we butt heads so much with my mayor and the police service board, just trying to say, I need the police on the streets. I need to see more police. I need to see a communications person at every event that we host. Because when does the 13-year-old Black boy who was innocently skipping and happily going to school suddenly become a criminal when he turns 14? It's because the police officer didn't see him when he was 9, 10, 11, 12, and see that he was just a cute, happy boy. But the moment a white neighbor calls the police or sees someone in my backyard, you come with that intensity of viciousness. Why are you in it? Why? Because you didn't know him. And I had to fight for that to happen at the police board so that we could have bikers on neighborhoods, just getting to know our kids. And then I fought to have a communications officer at events so that there's that police presence and it's part of building community, right? And so we had to create that office. The commander had to support that idea because the mayor was so against it. I couldn't understand it. But what was happening was an intimidation that was happening. We would go back and forth. He would say, Khadija, you cannot tell him that. We're not here to tell him what to do. And I said, then why are we here? If we're not here to support and bring new ideas for the commander, what am I doing here? And so we took it to the public where we couldn't hide our button heads. And that day I confronted him and he thought I was gonna back down, and I said, Councilor Haliru, are you accusing me of this? I said, no, I'm not accusing staff. He says, are you accusing staff of doing something wrong? I said, no, I'm not accusing staff. I'm accusing you. And he reported me to the Integrity Commissioner. And I was investigated for 3 months. I wasn't fined, but then he was fired. And then another one was hired, and then I was fined. And I invited the whole Black Opportunity Network to the council meeting to witness what was happening. Classic case of not being aware enough of what you're doing to know that you're doing what you shouldn't be doing. Basically putting me on a chopping block. First-time counselor, was just doing my job. It was a debate to me. I was reported. I was accused of having a social media page that was used for communicating with the public because I was the only one who had one that was dedicated to my office. Everybody else forgot that they grew up in Ingersoll and used the same private Facebook page they had to run their election. I had to open a brand new one. So those little nuances in the way that you see people and what something as innocent as having a Facebook page meant to someone caused me problems. I was fined, I wasn't paid for a month. And so these are the things that I had to go through. For the first time, being investigated for 6 months, I saw therapy. And I felt, wow, this is what it means when we hear systemic discrimination. This is what it is. It is not that the rules have changed, but it's the power of the system that could be used against you. And so I did a survey on all the women we had gathered and all the Black candidates we had found. And I discovered that every one of them had had an investigation. Every single one of them. And it's a tactic to silence you as a Black candidate when you get into the room. So, my dears, it is one thing to be affected by it, or it is another thing to know how to present yourself and defend yourself. Luckily for me, I could defend myself. Next slide. And so, a 12-month roadmap for people that ask me. The Black Opportunity Network decided when I started going through this thing with the mayor, it inspired me to create the Black Opportunity Network. I felt like this story playing out could actually be a lesson for others. And so I also wanted to bring my story in of how I never had to campaign for an election, but was asked to run, and realizing that you don't run the year that you want to wake up, you run because you've built relationships. So now to 12 months, which is less than 12 months you have now if you're running, basically you want to volunteer. You want to attend council meetings and listen and learn how it works. You want to basically listen deeply to your neighbors, understand what the real issues are because they become your platform. 9 to 12 months you recruit your team, campaign manager, communications, canvases, finance lead, just your handful of friends. I was just saying to Ada, you need to have a barbecue. So I'll give you 2 tips. I wasn't well known. I was only known as a business owner downtown. The few people who are active in your community know you, right? There's so many people in your community who don't even care. They've never been downtown. If you ask some people, they haven't been downtown for 10 years. You agree, right? So I knew people didn't all know me. So I decided to invite 25 people that I thought I had built real relationships with, friends. And I asked them to come for tea. So I went to the Lions Club and I invited people for tea. In that room, I asked 25 people, I'd like to hear what each and every one of you has to say about me if I chose to run for office. And everybody got to stand and say something. Everybody was encouraging. Everybody was happy. But you know what I did that day? I planted 25 seeds in the community. And everybody went out to speak. And I planted 25 defenders where somebody was gonna be a bit racist, someone was gonna say, come on, you don't know her. Where someone was happy and excited, somebody was gonna be like, wow, that's amazing, I would vote for her in a heartbeat. And where someone was racist, somebody would be like, you're kidding me, right? You are that shallow, like, have you seen her? Have you spoken to her? You know what I mean? So that is a big secret that I did. And then I had another dinner as a fundraiser and invited key mentors in the community, people that were really respectable. And again, heard from them. And that was how I was able to really hone down my platform. And so I tell people this because I feel like everybody deserves to know. People ask me all the time, how did you do it in a white town? Does that explain how I did it? It was not just being known. It was not just being seen. It was about me making another effort to really hear people, inviting them to say, how do you think this makes sense? Or how, and that was it. And then you launch your brand, you get photos, you build a website, you build a media kit, and I wrote myself a press release. Because when I announced I was gonna win, I was gonna run, I saw a pattern. The radio would pick up when a candidate made an announcement, right? And say, hey, so-and-so has picked up their form, they're joining the race. And after the 7th or so person had been announced, I went and I picked my form. I waited. A day, 2 days, nobody announced my candidacy. I was like, okay, I'll wait, maybe Monday. I waited Monday, I wasn't announced. So I wrote a press release. ChatGPT helped me do that. And I sent it off to the radio station and I'm like, I think you missed me. I also took a form to join the race. Oh, Khadija, we're so sorry, we didn't notice. Oh, we're just about to talk about you, and I said, thank you, you can use that press release. And they didn't have to write anything about me, I gave them everything they needed to know. I need a clap for that. Because that was the first time I felt, what? Invisible, like I'm actually making an effort here. And you still want to discount me? No. And so you do that, and then you knock on every door, run every call. When you decide to run for office, there's a lot of help. You get a lot of help from the government. The provincial government gives you lists of voters. You get to see who and who are in your neighborhood. You get to see people's, addresses, updates to people who've moved and so on. So you're not going to be left alone. You're going to have a blueprint, right? And so when you start to knock doors, you need to have ready answers to those things that you care about. How are you going to solve those problems? What are you going to say at the door? But you're not going to come campaigning. You're coming to listen. Remember? You're knocking the door and you'll say, hey, my name is Khadija. I decided to join the race. I feel passionately about this town. I feel like I have some solutions I'd like to propose. What are your concerns? I'd love to hear what you think about Ingersoll. Oh, don't get me started. And then you hear everything, okay? Next slide. So the foundation, again, every strategic step I have shared tonight rests on something, no campaign or manual, will teach you. I tried to do the campaign school to get insights, and I realized it's just how to run, the structure, the framework. But know who you are. Know who you are, and then know who you are before you ask anyone else to know you. There's something about being popular. We see it on social media. Some people are so popular, they have so many likes. They sell products, but they haven't made a sale in 3 months. They have 1 million likes, but nobody's buying their product, okay? And there's some people that just have 1,000 likes, and they're making millions off one product. So it's about knowing who you are. What do you bring to the table? How am I feeling and seeing my community? How do I want to better my community? Do I have the capacity to focus on this issue or that issue? Because you really want to focus on what you know best, what you're passionate about, what you truly want to fix. One of the very personal issues for me was going to a door and somebody saying their disabled father was left behind on the porch for an appointment at the hospital because he took too long to get ready for the taxi. And we only had one taxi service in town. And I know that the taxi service gets really busy, but how do you do that to someone, right? And we heard about how sometimes you wait 30 minutes to an hour to get the taxi to come because they're too busy. So the question I asked and the motion I presented was, I'd like to revise the taxi bylaw because there must be a reason why we don't have competition. The rumor was like, oh, the former mayor had some shares or something, and it's a rumor. But my question was simply, I want to propose a motion for staff to review the taxi bylaw so that we can identify the bottleneck as to why we don't have competition. Simple. The next week, after the CAO says there is no reason why there is no competition except we just haven't had applications, I said, I think there must be a bottleneck. And from what I read, we require every person wanting to come in as a business to have a parking lot of a minimum size. Perhaps maybe that's a bottleneck. And for some reason, maybe people in the last 10 years have not even bothered, but the moment we didn't pass a new law, we didn't change the bylaw, people just kind of paid attention and said, oh, that's all I need? And the next thing, 2 weeks later, we had 2 more taxi services in Ingersoll. And now if one doesn't come, I call the other one. And that's how simple you can make a change in your community. What will your community look like today if all of you had a seat at the table? It means that everybody's problems, concerns, issues will be addressed, right? Because even if you don't all have them the same way, the compromise will make it best for everyone. And that's what happens when the seat is diverse. So live your values before you ask anyone to vote for them, which is your empathy, your kindness, your integrity in making sure everyone feels the same and has the same opportunities. Because leadership is trust. In my language, we say it's an amana. Amana is trust. Amana is trust. It is heavy. And this is why it's easy for someone like me to say, I'm not going to run again. Because I've done the best that I can. And I feel the room is becoming more political than working. And why would I take from others? Because to come in and know the situation might deprive my community of more progress than to sit there and be a bottleneck. So I identify someone I want to support and leave the room empty so that someone new can come in. And my whole goal is to make sure that my seat remains diverse. So heart, mind, soul, and aligning is what makes a leader truly trusted over time. And I just told you the story, how it all came together. Most of you in university will know that this is where it starts. I first became the president of a student union in university. And I tell you that story, I didn't even plan it. I was in 100 levels. I told my dad, hey, I was going for this meeting. He's like, okay, sure, have fun. And I went to the meeting and they were fighting over asset management or something. And I sat in the back and I watched 2 men go at it. And I'm like, can I just suggest something? I'm like, yeah. Why are we fighting over who owns the typewriter and who owns the whatever? And can we not just evaluate everything and split it across the middle based on value? Because there's some cash and there's some property, right? And someone just said, yeah. How much is a typewriter, by the way? how much is, and I say typewriter, I age myself, but you know what I mean. So we just, and everybody was like, okay, that's it, settled then. And then the next agenda item was, now we need a vice president nomination. And 4 people said, I nominate her. And I was like, no, I'm just a first year student. And they're like, no, that's fine, that's okay. I said, no. And they said, I'll second that, I'll second that, I'll second. And I was like, what is second? And then the next thing, oh, all in favor, oh, that. I'm like, what? And they started clapping. And I'm like, what happened? They said, you're the vice president. I'm like, of what? I'm like, I went home and my dad said, ooh, good for you. I'm like, Daddy, I didn't even, he said, well, you're trained now. They're gonna train you, and that's how it happened. So for me, being the vice president was such an honor and a privilege. I needed to learn fast, and my second year, I was still the vice president. Third year, I said I wasn't campaigning. The boys went to the boys' hostel, they invited everybody for a meeting, and they promised if anybody stood up to campaign against me, they were gonna be in trouble. And so I'm at the meeting waiting, where's everybody? How come people are not at the meeting? And the next thing, I come and everybody's like, we're nominating you to be president. And I became the first woman president of any association in my university, the largest university in Nigeria. When I tell this story, I'm not bragging, I'm just telling you how things happen. So it's no surprise to me that I found the confidence to, okay, let's try. You know, I talked to my kids, my kids were like, Mommy, just get paid for what you do already. That was their reaction. Because for every community we've ever been, I take my kids and I go volunteer. And the first 2 friends that I made in Ingersoll today, when I got to Ingersoll, the first Ramadan, I went to the recreational center, I booked the kitchen, and I posted it on Facebook and I said, we're newcomers to the town. It's the first day of Ramadan for Muslims. It's the month we fast for 30 days. And I want to invite the whole town to come break bread with us. And about 25 teenagers showed up, and 2 adults, one invited her mother, and those 2 adults are my best friends still today. It all starts with service, guys. It all starts with having the audacity to be seen, to show up, to step up, to not shrink. So if you want to learn more about my story, I actually just launched my book last night called From Zaria to the World. If you go on Amazon, it's there. And I talk a little bit deeply. I didn't want to be petty. I didn't want to talk about but it's inspirational in a way that you can tie it all together. It's about what you do, how you show up, you know, how you come to events, how you learn about your community, how you advocate for your people, your community. Because you can't fix lies in the future. Somebody's gonna lie about you. But if they go back and they see that it wasn't true, they just bought you a vote. You just do what you can today and live in your present, because you cannot promise truth where it never was. And if you do live truth every day, tomorrow it just accumulates to push you up. And it gives you the confidence, it builds you up to be able to stand up and talk and inspire others. So I hope my story has inspired you today. I just feel like I don't have a really hard question to how do you do it, how did you do it, how did you run? This is the truth. And that's my story. Thank you.